welcome everyone to Terengganu Multidisciplinary International Conference Termit 2025 and to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker for International Academic Conference IAC, Associate Professor Dr. Jamaluddin Aziz. Associate Professor Dr. Jamaluddin is currently attached to the Center for Media and Communications Research, Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities at Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM. He is a renowned scholar in critical media studies, focusing on film studies, gender, and critical theories. Associate Professor Dr. Jamaluddin obtained his PhD specializing in the noir thriller genre and his master's degree in contemporary literary studies, both from University of Lancaster in the United Kingdom. He also holds a bachelor's degree in Tassel Honours from Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia. Associate Professor Dr. Jamaluddin has contributed extensively to the research and editorial fields. He serves as the chief editor of Academica, Journal of Southeast Asia Social Sciences and Humanities, and a sub-editor for Gemma Online Journal of Language Studies, UKM. His research has been widely published in high-impact journals, and he has worked on numerous national and international research projects focusing on media, gender, and society. Today, Associate Professor Dr. Jamaluddin will be sharing his insights on decolonizing knowledge, why our context matters, a topic that invites us to rethink what we know and how we know it. Please welcome Associate Professor Dr. Jamaluddin Aziz.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Puan Pengerusi Majlis, iaitu pelajar PhD saya sendiri, Prof yang berusia Prof Dr. Azman Cikman dan semua kawan-kawan akademik dan juga student. Saya rasa saya sebenarnya daripada UKM, jadi saya mesti memulakan di dalam bahasa Melayu. Kerana UKM adalah untuk memertabatkan bahasa Melayu, tapi saya ingin memohon izin untuk berucap di dalam bahasa Inggeris. Boleh Alright, because sebabnya adalah international conference. Satu lagi tabiat saya tak suka rostrum. Jadi saya mungkin akan bergerak sikit dan saya dah minta kebenaran juru kamera supaya kejar-kejarlah saya. Alright. Okay, saya harap semuanya okay. Orang media tak pandai pegang mic ni bahaya Alright, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so honored to be here today and because of the opportunity to deliver the keynote for IAC. This is my first conference here in Dungun. It's kind of walking down a memory lane because I was once a student at Sekolah Sains Dungun just for a bit before I moved to a technic school, and the rest is history. So when I came here yesterday, when I arrived, there was a sense of nostalgia as well, but the place has changed 360 degrees. I couldn't recognize anything except for the name Dungun. That's it, right? All right, without further ado, I'm going to talk about decolonizing knowledge. And the question that I would like to pose is why our context matters, right? No, just the title first. Who is the clicker? Who is the clicker? Who clicks the... can you go back to the title? Yes, because I would like to unpack the title a bit. Thank you very much. It's okay because nanti bila saya cakap click Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, why are we talking about decolonizing knowledge? Because I think, especially when we talk about the theme of the conference, which is empowering minds, innovation in education for sustainable development, do you realize that some of these words are actually not our words? And some of these words are actually Western-centric words, but we use them without actually questioning. And why we need to think about the context, because where we come from matters. Who we are matters, right? Whatever we do matters. And what I'm saying here today is all of you matter, right? So no matter how small you are, even though you are a student in your first semester, you matter, because this is the beginning of a journey, and I would like to invite you to this particular journey with me. And I think when we talk about decolonizing knowledge, I think you will try to understand the fact that we were colonized before, right? We were colonized by the Portuguese, we were colonized by the Dutch and the Japanese, of course, but Japanese was a different kind of colonization. And then we have the British. So this is about trying to think about what legacy has been given to us, has been left to us, has been imposed to us, so that we think this is who we are, but actually this is not really who we are per chance. All right, the next slide, please. All right, so before I begin with my talk, I would like to start positioning myself, because my talk is very much about my own perception, my own view, my own opinion based on my own readings, all right? So you have to understand that this is basically based on my knowledge, based on my evaluation of whatever that's happening around me, and it's not really something that you cannot argue about. So you are allowed to disagree with me. You are allowed to say, no, Dr. Jam, I disagree with you. And I welcome that, right? So in terms of context, I'm a critical media scholar. So my paradigm is critical paradigm, because in communication, we have different paradigms. And I think in so many fields of study, we have different paradigms. But I come from critical media studies paradigm. And I'm a male, a man, I'm Malay, I'm a Muslim, I'm from UKM. And these are very important, because they define who I am, right? So if you are a woman, a Muslim, you might not agree with me because I'm a man. Do you understand what I'm saying? But that's okay. That's okay. But you need to understand where I'm coming from, why I argue the way I argue, or why I say what I say. All right? And basically, as the Madam Chairperson introduced myself, my work is basically an intersection of media, culture, and gender, or you can call multidisciplinary in that sense, right? And I was also a gender expert for the Ministry of Women, Family, and Community Development, or KPWKM. Actually, I was the only gender expert appointed by the ministry. After that, they just don't appoint a new one. Maybe I was not successful. So I was the only gender expert till now. And now I'm holding the post of the chief editor of Academica, which is a Southeast Asia Journal of Social Sciences and Humanities. So basically, why I'm saying all of this is because I will talk about decolonizing knowledge, and I would relate it to my work in Academica as well. So I hope you'll be able to see what I'm saying here and what we are looking for in Academica, because some of you will be submitting papers to Academica, or some of you might be interested in publishing in journal articles. So I will share some of my experiences. I'm not claiming that I am the expert in the area, but I will share whatever that I have, right? All right. Another caveat is the issue that I'm talking about and the position that I am in now, right, is actually filled with irony, contradiction, right? And this is because whatever that we see in today's world, there's a lot of contradictions, right? We talk about our need for the development of infrastructure, right? But ironically, at the same time, we argue about climate change, right? So that's the irony of it. You know, everything is contradictory. You want to be, for example, empowering minds. We want people to be empowered, their minds to be empowered, right? But then if your minds are empowered in certain countries, you'll be in prison, right? So there are a lot of ironies going on in our country and also the world over. So what I'm saying here is, I would like to bring the idea that whatever that I'm talking here today, you might disagree, but because you think, because what I'm saying has its own contradictions, all right? And I would like to present a disclaimer as well, because what I'm presenting here does not reflect the position and opinion of UKM, because I don't want to be sued by UKM, because who knows, because it's on YouTube, anything can happen, right? Not that I'm a celebrity, but I can be a celebrity if this thing happens. All right, so next, please. All right, my approach today, it's important for me to talk about my approach, because I think you need to understand where I'm coming from and the lens that I'm using in doing the analysis of what I'm talking about. So I'm using hermeneutic approach. Hermeneutic is actually a theory and methodology of interpretation through text, language, and symbolic expression. Symbolic, for example, you know, like images that we see outside that has different meaning, right? So something like that, I interpret them. And for now, for example, you are my text. I am reading you. I'm interpreting you. And I see a lot of young people here, right? Are you guys young? Yeah, so my reading is, and my interpretation is accurate for this matter. Of course, there's one not so young person in front of me, but younger than I am, right? So basically, what I'm trying to do today is a bit challenging, but I love the challenge, because basically what I would like to do is to put all the terms, right? When you talk about sustainable development, when you talk about innovation, when you talk about empowering, when you talk about minds, I'm not going to just talk about it just like that. For me, these are the things that we always take for granted, or what I call taken for grantedness. Because when people talk about sustainable development, you just read the international document and you believe that this is what we ought to be doing, because it's supposed to be a collective effort for collective good, right? So this is the problem that we have in our historical present, because we have problem with taken for grantedness, right? You might be taken for granted why I'm here. I might be taken for granted why you are there, right? This taken for grantedness is a culture that we have, especially among Malaysians, because it's easier not to question anything. It's easier to accept things for what they are, right? But as scholars, as students, you need to, in order to empower your minds, especially empowering your souls, you should be able to put all these terms under the microscope and study them and question them, analyze them, debate about them, and put forth your argument, right? That's how you empower people. That's how you empower your mind and your soul, right? All right, next. All right, the conference theme for IAC is actually bridging gaps, right? Inclusive education for a sustainable development, which I think is a demarcation of empowering minds as well. It's part of the branch of, the theme of the main conference. In this case, what I'm going to do, as I said, I'm not going to take things for granted, but what I'm saying is I will use quite a lot of critical language rather than technocratic language. Technocratic language will be like empowering minds, because this is the language used by the government. This is the language used by the United Nations. So that's why we call them as technocratic language. Right? So the difference between technocratic language and critical language is that the main difference is that we don't accept technocratic language as it is, because for us, each of these words must be defined based on their own context, whether it's spatial context or space context or temporal context, which is the time context. Right? So when we talk about empowering minds, for example, in Malaysian context, it's insufficient. Why do you think it's insufficient? Because we We are a Muslim majority country. It's not about the minds, it's about the souls. So if we use only the minds, we forget. But why the language the technocrat is using empowering minds only and not souls? Because genealogically, historically, we can trace this to the establishment in United Nations, in the Western world, in which there is a separation between religion and social life. Do you understand? So this is an example why we should not just agree with this, right? And say, all right, okay, everybody is talking about empowering minds. That's all that we need. But in our context, we need a lot more than empowering the minds. We have seen examples of people with powerful minds end up in jail because they don't have powerful souls. A lot of cases of corruptions come from people with powerful minds, right? Right? Yes. But we have to balance that with powerful soul. So that's the reason why we need to question whatever that is being forced into our throat. We have to question that because at the end of the day, this is our context, right? And even though I've said what I've said, but I'm not trying to undermine the theme because I think the theme is good. The theme is excellent and progressive, right? And we need to have such a theme because we have to have a common understanding. But what I'm saying is we need to be very careful because at the end of the day, we come from a different context. We have different values. We have our own inspirations, our own aims and goals in life. Right? So always remember that even when your lecturer puts something on the screen, don't just accept it as right. I keep saying to my student, if you see anything wrong with my slide, you tell me. Right? Because the students, they come from their own context, their own background. They should be able to say what they need to say. But of course, in our culture, in a very polite way. Right? You don't have to scream at me to say that I'm wrong. You can just say, Dr. Jem, I think you are wrong. I'm okay with that. Right? But that's what being critical is about. Being able to accept criticism as well. So what I'm saying here, we accept the theme, but we need to go a step above or a notch above to question the theme itself and to contextualize it, to domesticate it, and to localize the knowledge that we have. All right, next. All right, let me give you a very simple way of introduction. Can you see that? Can you see that on the screen? You can see that, right? All right, I was typing the title, Decolonizing Knowledge. Can you see that it's being highlighted? Right? Why do you think it's being highlighted? Why do you think it's being highlighted? Have you ever thought why it's being highlighted? Why? This is a taken for grantedness that I was talking about, right? So it was highlighted. Next slide, please. All right, if you look at that, when I was typing that, because of the red line underneath it, I question, because this is a thing that I do, I question who gets to decide and why do this machine decides that the machine has to underline decolonizing, right? Of course, I know that because I type it in British English and not American English, right? I know, but who to decide that I should use American English and not British English or Malaysian English, right? So the question that I had at the time was, what spelling should I use? And what format should I follow? What standard should I comply with? Just because of this particular line. Does that happen to you when you do your assignment? Does that make you think why you have to follow that format? Why? Because the lecturer says so? because the computer says so, right? So don't take for granted, because at the end of the day, if you want to empower mind, you cannot be followers. You should be leaders. You should be inventors, not the use of innovation. Right? I am a user of Microsoft. I'm so powerless that I have to use whatever that is being prepared by the innovators who are in the West, probably. Right? See, this is what happens when you are not challenging the norm. You are not questioning the taken for grantedness, things that you never question because it is what it is for you. You can't do that. Huh? You have to start questioning. Now, if you look at the room, for example, do you question why the room has to be shaped like this? Why me as a speaker has to be on the stage? Why? Why can't I just go and walk and mingle with all of you? What makes it like me so superior that I have to stand here? Why? Do you understand? I question the fact that why do I have to stand here behind this? What happens to this beautiful body? Nobody can see it, because of this rostrum. Do you understand what I'm saying? Don't just accept things as they are. You have to question. Of course, things are done for a purpose. For example, before I move, I ask the technician whether I can move because they want to capture the camera and whatnot, just as a way to understand the context as well. But I hope you, especially the young academics, the students, you need to start questioning, because without the ability to question, not just questioning for the sake of questioning, questioning with knowledge, you will have a very empowered mind and you'll be able to innovate. Right? Innovation usually comes from not taking for granted. A lot of innovations happen when you care. Right? When you care. Like when you think that a community doesn't have water, so how are you going to help them? Then you innovate. But if you walk through a village and you see a well and you think, oh, they are all right with water because they have well, you didn't even ask whether the well is usable, the water in the well is potable or drinkable, right? So you take for granted. So you miss the opportunity to innovate, right? So I'm moving the mind of you into thinking, all right, now I have to try not to take things for granted, even to the level of when you are doing your assignment, ask yourself, when you are writing an article, ask yourself, why do I have to do this? All right? Okay, next slide, please. All right. This is another way we have a consciousness that creates taken for grantedness. If you look at that, right, media and representation, this is the standard idea of beauty that is being perpetuated to us, right? But just be honest. Look at that. How many of you have large eyes? How many of you have small nose? How many of you have small mouth, fair or light skin, shaped jaw, V-shaped jaw, small faces? I'm talking about the lady, the guy, you don't have to think like this, all right? Even though the idea of good-looking guy has also moved this way, right? If you look at Korean idea of masculinity, it's also like this, right? But why do we want our men to look like that? Right. Okay. Let me ask you an honest question. This is about empowering mind, right? How many of you think that you are beautiful or handsome? Good. Yeah, good. What about, one guy raised his hand, right? How many of you think that you are okay, you are good looking? Why? Is that because you use this as your beauty standard? Right? That's the thing. All of us, when we ask or were asked this question, we would say no. Right? We would not say no. But a study that I've done among Gen Z shows that, especially Gen Z, they are spending, I think about 25% of them are spending more than 300 ringgit per month just on beauty product. Do you understand? And the Gen Z that I'm talking about, they are students. Imagine students spending 300 ringgit and more on beauty product. I think that's a lot of money, right? 300. I don't have to spend that much money, but I still look good, you know? So that's very important. If you feel good, you look good. But what I'm saying is the media has a big role in influencing the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about the world. Okay, importantly, it is also an agent or a tool that creates what I call common sense. Right? So they create common sense. Okay, how does common sense work? Okay, next photo, next slide, please. All right, I will answer that common sense question later. But look at AI. Right, AI. How many of you are using AI? Yes. Now, do you know that your worldview is an AI worldview? And AI is very intelligent, right? So what about your own worldview? What about your own context? Does it matter? Does it matter? Because now the way you see the world, because when you do your essay or when you do your paper, when you do whatever, you use AI. Now, people use AI for relationship advice, right? And people use AI as a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Yeah, but that's a story for another talk, right? Yeah, some of you are, but secretly, if you go and check your friends' history in the laptop, you will see some of them are using AI for their relationship. But what I'm saying here is you need to understand the danger of AI because AI creates knowledge from a certain perspective. And who creates AI? Dominantly, they are like Americans, for example, until we have Chinese, right? And just imagine our worldview, because we use AI, is actually controlled by the Americans' worldview. Right? Even the language is controlled by the inventor of AI. That's the reason why China, as another superpower, they created another version of AI to combat the American AI because they understand the danger of worldview. So your task to be innovative is not to rely on this AI, but to create your own AI that is rooted in our culture, in our belief, and in our context. Right? So that is the reason why I'm showing this, because I would like you to start questioning. I know some students, for example, even as academic, AI is an easier way out. But without we knowing or because we take it for granted, we are actually allowing ourselves to be colonized through knowledge. So basically, our knowledge is still being colonized, even though we have achieved our independence in 1957. Right? How are we supposed to empower minds if we are still shackled by the colony or the colonial power through knowledge? How? Right? If our people or if the community, especially academic community, still takes things for granted, not questioning, use it for convenience, we will not have empowered mind and we will not be able to innovate. Do you understand? So that's the reason why I think it's important for us to question why we are using what we are using and how important it is for us to start questioning the content of the things that we consume as users. All right? Okay, next. All right, what about this? Do you know what is this? Huh? Waste, right? Right. So you are using waste, right? And do you know what waste is supporting? Do you know what waste is supporting? Of course, another GMAP is also supporting that. But the one that gets a lot more income out of the technology is actually this technology. So we are protesting all over the world because of the country that commits genocide. Yet we are happily using this without even questioning. So if we start questioning, we have the moral obligation, especially young innovators like you, to innovate. Do you understand? So if you have the knowledge, you have the capability to question, then you'll be able to understand the context in which not only we are using something that is designed not specifically for us, but also designed to help parties that are not allies with us. Right? So we take it for granted, and yet we don't realize that we are supporting a certain place that commits a certain crime in this world. Do you understand? So we need you. We need you all, academic, students, experts, to actually localize, to contextualize our own geography, our own map, our own territory. And political territory is also a real territory, right? So I hope you ITM students and lecturers, engineering, can create our own, I don't know, call it what? Dungun, arah, whatever, as long as it's not waste. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, I hope so. Sorry, I keep asking that question because I like to see young people nodding because I was once young. I'm very old now. I'm 50 over. I'm actually older than Prof. Azman. I just learned today that I'm 50. Well, I know that I'm 54, but he's only 50, you know. But basically, I'm old. But I like to inspire young people. And through this keynote, I would like you to be aware of the fact that to be innovative, you have to have an empowered mind. To have an empowered mind, you have to have knowledge, right? But that knowledge has to come or has to be rooted in our own culture, tradition, standard, morality, and understanding of our own landscape. All right, next. All right, what about this? The guys, what do you think of this? The girls, what do you think of this? Super heroine, yeah? Or female superheroes, right? Okay. How many of you watch films on superheroes? Right. So you are being exposed to this kind of image, right? Right? So you might start thinking, oh, my wife should look like one of them. Right? And the ladies or the girls, oh, if you want to be empowered, you have to be like these superheroes. Right? So this is the idea that the West, particularly Hollywood, is selling to us. To be empowered, you have to be like this. Especially women empowerment should be like this. You should wear like this. You should talk like this. Of course, you should not be able to fly. But what I'm saying is, you should be able to talk whatever that you want to talk to be empowered. But our value says differently. The strength of Malay women, right? The strength of Malay women especially is not in how hard or how strong they are in lifting things, right? The strength of Malay women is in their softness, their tenderness, their gentleness. But we have never been told by Hollywood. In Hollywood, if you are gentle, you are weak, right? And we all grow up believing that to be strong, we have to be like what Hollywood is telling us. Even now, if you think about professional dress, if you look at professional dress, they are all modeled after Western design. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you go for an interview, they teach you, if you want to go for an interview, you have to wear blazer. You have to wear skirt like that because that's formal. Whereas wearing kebaya, wearing kurung, it's not considered as formal. And again, the question is, who decides that's the right one? And why should we listen to that decision? Right? So that's why we don't have to just accept things as they are, right? So this is also knowledge from the West that we need to decolonize, right? Meaning that we have to start saying, no, this is the idea, the ideology that we don't want to embrace anymore because they are not what we are. They are not supposed to become our aspirations, right? So we need to stand up and say, no, Malaysian knowledge, local knowledge, they are very important. And do you think why the government built a campus in Dungon? Why? Because local knowledge is important. Do you know that? Right? Not because I love Dungon, let's build another UiTM. No, because local knowledge is important. All right? Okay, next, please. Okay, from what I've said just now, right, they look very small to a lot of people. Oh, small matter, small matter, small matter. All right? However, I would argue that this small matter is very ideological. Ideological meaning it becomes a common sense, right? It becomes a common sense. A common sense is dangerous. It is a bad common sense. Do you understand what I'm saying? Common sense because you just follow things, because you just say, all right, because everybody is doing it, because everybody is saying it, everybody is following it, doing it, right? That is common sense. Or you would say, because my grandfather also did it. My grandmother also did it. Those are what we call common sense, right? But according to Antonio Gramsci, right, common sense is actually a widely held belief by a society, and these are shaped by culture and ideology. So when Hollywood sells us the story, they sell us their common sense. Right? Right? They are not just selling the images, they are selling us common sense. So when they are selling us a common sense, we just say, okay, we accept it. I accept it because it's true. And do you realize when you watch Hollywood films, even though the event happens in America, they make it like a global issue or universal issue. Do you understand? Like when Superman flies to the orbit and spin the Earth again, so it becomes like America saving the whole world because they want us to believe that. Do you understand what I'm saying? They want us to believe that it's common sense for a white man to come and help us. Right? So this is what we call hegemonic common sense, which is a common sense that is bad for us. Because anytime there's an opportunity for people to use, it's okay because it's universal values. And then we say, oh yeah, universal values, even though it might be contradictory to our values as Muslims. right? Notions like human rights, right? If you are in Sharia law or if you are of law knowledge, you understand that human rights that we have is not really friendly to Islamic human rights because we have our own Islamic human rights that was, I think, signed in Cairo before. But the government or most states don't really recognize Islamic human rights, even though we should be rooted to Islamic human rights. Do you understand? So we need to understand these are the things through popular culture, through the media, through the books that we read written by the West, we learn about common sense. We learn about how to behave in this world. We learn how to understand our world. Right? So when I ask about you and you would say, oh, this is me, especially young people, oh, this is me. You have to accept me the way I am. But how do you know that this is you when you are not even you? Because you are just part of the Western common sense. All right? So common sense is very, very critical for us to understand when we want to empower minds. Right? When we want to close the gap, when we want to be inclusive, we cannot take things for granted. We cannot accept it as a common sense. So I'm using common sense as a critical language, not as a technocratic language, as I said before. Next. All right. These are some images I found in my Apple laptop. You see, even Apple is playing with the language of inclusivity. It's important. Inclusivity is important because it allows marginalized community to be heard, to have a voice. But sometimes it becomes technocratic and then it has to be measured. That's the problem with technocratic, and it's also the advantage of technocratic language because it allows things to be measured. Right? When you do research, it's always, oh, how do you measure this? Right? How do you measure this? People in science or statistics would know that. You have to measure everything. But we don't have to measure everything in our context. I remember in my earlier year as an academic, I attended a conference in Thailand and somebody presented a paper and I always listen to presentation. And they were measuring your piety, your keimanan. Right? They measure your keimanan from social sciences. And do you know how often, how do they usually measure piety or keimanan in social sciences? Do you know how? Do you know, Prof. Azman? No. They measure, it's okay, we are sharing. I'm not challenging, we're sharing. They measure on how often you go to the mosque. Right? So I know you stay in the hostel, you have to go to the mosque, right? Kind of forced to go to the mosque. But doesn't mean your piety, your iman is very high, right? Maybe you go to the mosque and dream about the world and superheroes. Do you understand? So for me, that idea was ridiculous. What? So, you know, I mean, sometimes you pray on your own, but based on the measurement, even if you pray in your room, especially the ladies, because the ladies are not really compulsory to go to the mosque, right? So if the measurement is used to measure women's punya piety or keimanan, women will be less piety than men, less spiritual than men, because you don't go to the mosque. See, this is the danger of using Western measurement to study us. Right? Because we don't measure our piety, our keimanan, by how many times we go to the mosque. And we ourselves know some people go to the mosque to show off. But we always think good about people. Yeah, okay, that's one thing. But what I'm saying here is, see, if we just accept the methodology, the measurement produced by the West, we will always be behind. All right, another example that I would like to cite here, I'm also working with one government agency on empowering women, right? And we came out with a plan of action, right? A policy paper on women empowerment. So after that, we had a workshop. So each department of the agency presented to me their efforts to empower women. And one of the focuses of women empowerment and gender in Malaysia is women in leadership position. Do you know that? Women in leadership position. However, to be selected into that leadership, they have to go through tests. And the test including psychological test. But what shocked me was the tests were tests prepared by Western scholars. And I ask, how could you evaluate our mental health, our mental capacity using Western framework? Shouldn't we use Malaysian framework? Right? So in that sense, for me, if your lifestyle is more westernized, you can fit into the test better than people who are more Islamic. Where else, we want more, at least more religious conscious leaders. We don't want just empowering minds. We want to empower souls. Right? So now we have to start thinking. Then I challenge them. I say, okay, can you start researching, because you have research department or whatever, to do research on how to localize the construct, the measurement, so that more women who are considered conservative can become leaders. Right? I mean, if you are chosen as a leader because of the size of your heels, is that fair? Right? Or because you are blonde, blue eyes, even though you contact lenses. Is that fair? No. I mean, blonde, of course, not fair for me because I don't have hair, you know. But what I'm saying is you should be assessed, should be evaluated based on your context. Right? And for example, we want to promote families. So leaders should be rooted in family values. Right? But those Western questions, they forsake the importance of spiritual strength long time ago. And we are still buying it. Yeah, we are still buying it. So I hope young lecturers, professors, now it's time for us to challenge that knowledge. Don't just accept, oh, because, you know, these particular Western scholars are saying or talking about it, then it's supposed to be right. No. And from my own experience, to be honest with you, not all Western scholars are smart. But they say what they want to say. We are not stupid, but we are too afraid to say what we say. So they are able to say it, so they claim it's their idea, even though it's nothing new. But because we are quiet, so we don't say anything about it, so they don't know about us, where else it's nothing new for us. All right? So remember this, even this as a template will also shape the way you present your data. Right? If you look at the images here, they are limited to all, even though it's inclusive, but I've looked for Muslim women, Muslim men image. It's not there. And because of that, my presentation of this image cannot include the image of the Muslim. And how is that inclusive? Right? See, if you are not innovative enough, you are not putting Muslim pictures in it, you are constrained by the technology. You are constrained by what the technology provides you. Just like the first example, decolonizing the spelling, right? Your work is constrained by what the technology has provided for you. You can't go anymore. Therefore, we need people to innovate and to use our own images. In the organization that I worked before, when my whatever higher up present, they use all the images from the West. White boy, white girl, white women, white men. I said, what happens to us? We don't have any representation at all because they took the images from the internet, stock images. They took the images from the computer. All these images are not related to us. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's you guys, especially, and the girls, of course, the ladies, to content create images so that we can use to present like this, to include everybody. Because as it is, of course, there are different colors and shades, but it's not inclusive enough because it doesn't include our belief system. Right? But my presentation is constrained by what Apple can provide only. All right? This is only an example. Next. All right. My personal observations. Next, please. All right. These are the questions that I would like you to ponder. To have powerful mind, you always have to ponder upon questions, right? Who decides that the West is the emphasis of our knowledge creation? Emphasis is like center, the navel. Who decides that the West is the center of our universe? Who? Who decides? Right? Who decides what is universal and what is the truth? Who decides? Right? Southeast Asian knowledge is not really, we are not interested in Southeast knowledge because their method is not strong. Right? And the method not strong referring to us using their method, but we don't fully understand their method, and the method is not appropriate for our context. Therefore, our writing is not strong, so they say that we don't present the truth the way they understand it. Right? And then even when you submit to a journal, especially high impact journals, for academics, sometimes you receive comment that your article is not universal enough, whatever that means. Right? As if universalism belongs to one particular group only. So we, especially young ones, you have to have innovative mind so that you can present your own reality, your own truth, and we can contribute to the idea of that universalism, right? So when something is called, it's a global world, don't take it for granted. I will show you in the final, not the final slide, towards the end, why I'm questioning the idea of universal truth, why I'm questioning about universalism. All right? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, in addition to that, especially researchers like us, they always ask the question of how do you validate your data? Right? Not all areas of research need validation. Humanities scholar, for example, I'm a humanities scholar, we don't work on validation. We work on trustfulness. Our data should be trusted by you. Our interpretation should be trusted by you, not validated by anybody. But the idea of validation seems to be a universal term that we all have to accept. The question again is who gets to decide what is right or wrong for us? And importantly, why are we allowing this to happen? We are allowing it to happen because we take things for granted and we believe whatever that's happened is common sense. All right? Okay, next. Hello, where is the, okay. Hello, can I All right. I would like to introduce a term that's common in Marxism. See, I'm also using a Western theory. See, this is the irony that I'm talking about. Marxist talks about false consciousness that comes to mind. All right. What does false consciousness mean? It means an acceptance of ideas that are against our own best interest because the world says so. Simply speaking. So are you really conscious? That's a question that you need to ask. If you think that you are a global citizen, you are conscious about what's happening, the question is that real consciousness or is that false consciousness? False consciousness, for example, the consciousness that Hollywood has been perpetuating, saying that to be empowered, you have to dress like that, you have to talk like that, you have to be able to fight like that as women. Right? So basically that is their false consciousness. And you believe, oh, common sense, women has to be physically strong. Right? Because why? Because they have to fight the husband. Right? Do you understand? See, this is how false consciousness is shaped. They believe that this is good for you. Right? You believe. They make you believe that this is good for you, even though it's against your cultural values. It's against your religious values. Right? So remember that. When you think that you are conscious, is that really that you are conscious? So it goes back to the question when I asked, do you know who you are? And you said, yeah, this is me. Is that really you? Right? If you keep saying, oh, this is me, this is how I work, this is how I talk, but is that really you? Really? Right? Sorry? It's okay. Yeah. So people, especially young people now, they are so woke. They keep saying, oh, this is me. My hair like this because this is me. Really? Is that really you? Or is it a false consciousness that makes you believe that if you look like Korean star, that you are you? Right? So we need to understand who we really are by understanding the context. All right, next. Okay, what I am trying to do here is I would like to reclaim narratives about ourselves. I would like to bring to the fore the idea that we have a lot in front of us to use. We don't need other world, other reality to tell us that what we have in front of us is useless. Right? So we need to decolonize that thinking. And remember, even though globalization, whatever that means, may play in a role in decentering local perspectives, meaning that because of globalization, a lot of local things become less important. Because whatever we do, we have to fit into the globalization narrative, right? Globalization is very important in challenging local perspectives. And because of that, our local perspectives are only useful if they have monetary or financial values. This is very Marxist, very Marxist idea. What does it mean that things only have values if they have financial or monetary values? For example, right? Your look has no values unless you put a price tag to it. Your politeness has no values unless you put a price tag to it. This is how the world has been defined, right? That you are only valuable as a person if you are attached to a certain price tags. Do you notice that the philosophy of education, not the philosophy, the latest slogan in education, has also changed to reflect the demand of globalization? Before this, during my time when I was a student, education is about creating human being. And now, education is about creating human capital. Right, Professor Mann? Right? So you students especially, if you don't go out and work, employability zero, you have no values. Because you are failed human capitals. But why do we accept that? Even though you might fail as a human capital, you might be successful as a human beings. And your courses now are so niche, so specific that when you go out of the university, most of you won't be able to survive. Because you are trained to do one thing, that one thing that you learn at your university. During my time, we were taught to survive as a human being. You can throw us anywhere, we can survive. Because we were trained to be human beings. And to survive is to be human. Do you understand? See, when the language of globalization creeps into our education system, changing the need for human beings to human capital, people become valueless if they don't serve the capitalist agenda. I'm sure all of you agree, right? Let's say when you go out 6 months, you don't get a job, you are still valuable, right? 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 You're still valuable to your family, you're still valuable to your community, right? You might not bring money to the table, but you bring values to the society, to the community. But in the context of human capitals, you are not. That's why we have to decolonize that idea. Go back to our vision of creating human beings with values. We don't allow corruption. We are not quiet about corruption. Right? We are not quiet about injustices. How do we know about all these gaps in our society if we don't acknowledge them and speak about them? Right? So it's important for us to decolonize this knowledge and go back to our own root and understand where we are coming from so that we will be able to form an identity that we can call our own. So when in future, when I ask you, who are you? You are able to answer that question because you know your root. All right, next. Next. All right. So my invitation is, when you look at my examples, they are very personal examples because my own personal encounter. But this is an invitation borrowed from second wave of feminism, which is personal is political. Whatever that is personal is actually political, right? So I would like you to reflect and relate what I say with whatever that's happening around you and challenge your deeply held belief. That means you have to start challenging, if this is common sense, something is wrong. Are you willing to do that? To empower mind, you have to do that. All right, next. Okay, so importantly, this is a challenge that I would like to throw to everyone, that you have to think beyond the common sense, beyond the obvious. And you have to take each cultural moment, each cultural phenomenon to task and change that as a unit of analysis. Right? Every university now has to do employability tests, right? Change it, challenge it. What is a better term for employability? Does it mean that if we cannot produce workers to the country, that we are not successful as a university? No. Right? So we reject socialist, but we apply socialist belief system. Is it not irony? Right? So this is what we are talking about. The same thing with democracy. Right? The same thing with democracy. We just accept democracy as something that is good because common sense tells us that democracy is good. But do you know that the worst example or the worst product of democracy is actually Hitler? And you know what Hitler did? Do you know what Hitler? Do you know Hitler? Yeah, Alhamdulillah, you still know Hitler, right? And Hitler was the product of a democratic system. And we up till now keep saying, oh, democracy is the best. Democracy is the best. But history has told us that the worst to come out of democracy is Hitler. All right. So, and now you know what happens, right? Democracy in America. I'm not saying it, but I hope you read about it because we are experiencing it. All right. Okay, next. All right. What is decolonizing knowledge? Basically, what we are doing is to challenge Eurocentric or Western-dominated systems of belief. And then we need to reclaim marginalized, indigenous, and local ways of knowing. That means we have to use our own epistemology to understand our world, our reality. All right? Because what's important to us may not be important to other people in the world. All right, next. Okay, so why decolonizing is important? Why what I'm talking about is important? Importantly because with knowledge, we'll be able to shape the world. So knowledge actually shapes power. Who holds the power? You see, the West has been holding the power because they have the knowledge. They control the knowledge, right? China is now a competitor. China is holding the knowledge, so they are having the power. And because of power, they have their own identity. Not just they have the identity, they sell their identity to us. Right? So we are not Malaysian. We are neither Malaysian, we are not Westerners. Right? And the power structure. Right? Michel Foucault, a philosopher, a French philosopher, once said that knowledge is power. So what does it really mean? It means knowing something would empower you. Right? To empower mind, you need to know it. If you don't know it, there's no way you can conquer it. When the colonial came to us, right? The colonial, the British came to us. Why? You learn history, right? Why they came to us? Because they believe that they are civilized and they need to civilize us, right? And to be able to control us, they have to know us, right? They go into the jungle, they study us, they record about us, they make documentation about us. Because by having that knowledge about us, they can control us, right? So imagine now you know about big data, you register to use Google, you register to use Gmail, you register to use so many things, Shopee and whatnot, right? Why do you think you have to register to use all of those? Because those companies, they want to know you. When they know you, they can control you. That's why a lot of you are under control of Shopee. Right? Right? Yeah, because they have your data. They know what kind of things. And in this, what do you call it, algorithmic or algorithm, right? They know what you like. So if you like, every day you like looking at a certain product, you will see a lot of advertisements about products of the same kind will be bombarded. Arsenals of them will come to you. I remember before Raya, I was looking for a hotel to go back to in Kuantan because I came from Kuantan. So I used a certain company, search for a hotel in Kuantan. Even though I booked the hotel, I keep getting advertisement. Are you coming to Kuantan? Are you visiting Kuantan? You know, because they know that I'm going to Kuantan. So all advertisements about tourism will be, are you coming to Kuantan? There's a lot of Kuantan places or whatever. So you are being bombarded with information just because of one search that you did. And because of that, you think that's true. And in media, we have a theory about that. For example, right? If you are interested in, for example, accident news, right? Accident news or crime news, right? So when you read crime news, automatically our algorithm says this person enjoys crime news. So every time you click on your phone looking for the news, there are news about accidents. Until you feel like, oh my God, Malaysia is so bad. Everybody, they have accidents. Every day we have accidents, right? Every day we have motorcycle accidents, even though the news are repeating themselves. But because algorithm keep throwing in news about accident. And you know what will happen to us eventually? First, we believe that Malaysia has a lot of accidents every day. Second, it might create a fear that we might not be able to even drive or ride a bike. Right? Because it changes our reality. It changes our reality that Malaysian road is not safe. Right? So that's why we need local context to actually work on algorithm so that what we receive will not show us in a very bad light. So we understand our context better as well. So knowledge is power. So my advice to young people, seek knowledge. Seek knowledge. That's all. Seek knowledge. Because with knowledge, you will have the power to shape not only your future, but the structure of your society. All right, next. Okay, there is also a problem with dominant knowledge because our world is dominated by West or Western-centric knowledge, right? So this knowledge is basically what we call historical legacy. Colonialism, imposed Western education, erasing indigenous epistemology. Indigenous epistemology will be, not technology. Epistemology is our methodology in understanding our knowledge. Right? Let's say, if you want to interview fishermen, you have to understand their context. Right? Another thing about historical legacy from my own experience or my own observation as a Malay male Muslim UKM, because people have perception about UKM as well, right? It's very difficult for you in certain industries to approach the stakeholders. Because as I said, because I'm male, I'm Malay, I'm Muslim, and I'm from UKM. And they also have that perception about UITM, Malay, male, female, right? This is also part of the historical legacy that we have. I have read a few acknowledgements from Western scholars who did research in Malaysia. They came to Malaysia to collect data and they thanked so many people for treating them like family, inviting them for dinner, giving them total access to the data just because they are white, blonde, blue eyes. Do you understand what I'm saying? Even us as local researchers, they have that kind of perception. But if there is a blonde, white, English-speaking scholars, they will even pay for that person's dinner. Even if I want to pay for dinner to have an interview, they have no time. Do you understand? So the same thing, the perception that overseas graduates are better than local graduates. Whereas local graduates should be better because you tackle local issues, domestic issues, more direct issues related to our needs as a society. But because of this colonialism, imposed Western education, our pendulum has always moved that way, to the West. All right? The same thing. Next slide, please. Right, the same thing. We always privilege Western philosophy over local knowledge. Why are we not using, say, for example, even Samsu Amri, our prominent scholar, who talks about nation of intent? But we use all these Western anthropologists instead of local anthropologists. Why don't we use Ibn Khaldun, for example, who is closer to us in terms of civilization, right? But we still cite Aristotle, Gramsci, like me. You know, why? Do you understand? So because we still believe that this West provides us with universal theories, and then we ignore the local context, right? Because we use the word development, modernity, or something like that. To develop, you have to be modern. And modern is Western. Right? Please, if you think that you dye your hair blonde, that you are beautiful, no. Because our skin doesn't work with blonde hair. Unless you are born blonde, right? It's not. Do you understand? Those who say that you are good looking because you dye your hair blonde, don't let them be your friend. All right? No, just kidding. I mean, you are okay with that. All right. Next, please. Okay, Audre Lorde, right? When she talks about what do you call that? Epistemology, she says the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. That means for us to decolonize knowledge, we cannot use Western knowledge. We have to use our local knowledge to dismantle the colonial power. Even Einstein, if the keynote speaker says something, maybe he wasn't aware when he talked about the 21st century problem cannot be solved with 20th century problem, right? He was actually, whether he consciously realized that, he was actually citing Einstein. When Einstein says you cannot solve the problem by using the same thing that create the problem in the first place, right? So let's say if our problem is our students are so bad at reading, we cannot use the same thing that produces that problem to solve that problem. We have to think outside of the box. That's why you need to have empowered mind. You have to have knowledge. You have to decolonize knowledge. You have to challenge the Western conception of what we know about our world. You have to create your own tools so that we are not defined by those tools and we are not constricted by the tools that are provided by us. Right? So that's your challenge. Be a human being. Take up that challenge. All right, next. Okay, so how was knowledge colonized? They use mechanism of control, language. English is seen as more educated. Is that true? Do you feel that somebody who can speak English well is considered more educated than the those who are not very fluent? Is that true? You might say no, but if you use English in a bank, the treatment is different. I have experienced that, right? If I go to certain places, I would start with just speaking in Malay, right? You will see the difference when you change that to English. Because suddenly people think, oh, he must be educated. Do you understand? He must be educated. Even though, oh, okay, not really. Yeah, but that's right? And our education system is now very liberal. We almost embrace liberal education, right? So another thing that you need to understand as researchers, whatever your area is, especially young ones, please go and visit our national archives. People tend to forget that archives, right, keep a lot of historical documents that you need to go and understand, right? And you need to understand as well, no archive is neutral. Right? No archive is neutral. According to Jacques Derrida, another Western theories, because we don't go to archive to do research, so we cannot create a theory. So we have to borrow Western theory. According to Derrida's concept of archive fever, even the archive is ideological. You know why? Because the archive only keeps what the power that be allows you to keep. So your institutional memory, your national memory is the memory of the status quo. Therefore, you need to explore private archives to get documents that are not part of the national narrative. right? So if you want to be critical, you have to see different aspects, different narratives that provide different stories. So what I'm doing now today is also providing a counter narrative to the narrative that we often hear outside there. All right? So remember, students, young lecturers, my peers, go and visit the archives, whatever your area is, because we start from somewhere. Just be aware that archive is not a neutral place. It's a political place. I did ask you, Anis, right, to go to the archive to do research, right? Yeah, she's my PhD supervisor, so that's what I did. Okay, go to the archive because there's so many things that you can learn in the archive, especially if you want to invent. Go to the archive and see what else. Not just the archive, the museums, right? The museums, right? All right, next, please. Okay, so why context matters goes back to that basic question, because knowledge is never neutral. Knowledge is always a reflection of power and culture. So Hollywood transmits its power through the cinema. So the cinema is the conduit of their power in which they can control us, especially by creating common sense. All right? Even the act of watching film is a Western construct. Do you know that? Because if you go to the cinema in Malaysia, it's the same as cinema in the US, in the UK. Of course, there's slightly some differences, but it's the same way of watching film, right? If you go to the cinema, they even train you how to watch cinema. Where else? The way we watch bangsawan, wayang kulit, or the shadow, right? Shadow puppets, they are different. Because if you watch wayang kulit or the puppet, right? Shadow puppets, or you watch bangsawan, there is a sense of community, a communal that is integral to defining who we are. Cinema, even though it's communal, is so private, because if you say something in the cinema, somebody is bound to kick your seat, right? Because cinema is a place where you are with other people, but you are in your own world. And you know why they switch off the light when you watch film at the cinema? Not really. Because it's true, that's true. But because they want to create a dream-like situation. You are watching as if you are dreaming. You are in the state of sleeping. What happens when you are sleeping psychologically? You can be influenced, because when you dream, you are talking about your subconscious. So when you are in the state of dream, when you are watching a film, they will attack your subconscious. That's how we learn to think that Hollywood is always better, because they go into our subconscious, not the conscious, the subconscious, and it becomes our reality. It becomes our common sense. See, even the technology of watching, the behavior of watching a film is already curated in the way that you can be influenced without you knowing. And if people say that film is not dangerous, it is dangerous. At least in the classical way of watching film, going to the cinema, right? It is dangerous because it goes to your subconscious. It will become your habit without you knowing it. It becomes your world view, your world belief without you knowing it. So that's how dangerous watching a film at the cinema is. Right? So remember, knowledge can be transmitted in so many ways. And the challenge for us, especially natives of the land, or the indigenous people like us, I would call ourselves indigenous, is actually to apostatize, to put our knowledge on the pedestal and say that we are valid in our own way and we need to be heard in our own way. And our methodology might not be perfect for you, but it's perfect for our environment and for our people. Right? Okay, next. Right, so I would like to give you some examples of Western and indigenous knowledge, right? We have, for example, medicine, Western and traditional healing practices. If you go to the hospital and you say, oh, I'm taking some herbs, the doctor will say, no, don't take herbs, it's not good for you. You can see that binary opposition. And then you talk about agriculture, in which colonial they cash crop, whereas our indigenous agriculture, we try to sustain farming. That's the reason why in the old day, the orang asli, they burn, right? After their plantation, they burn the crops, right? Whatever, the trees, whatever, so that they will fertilize that particular land again. Because money is not their motivation. Their motivation is surviving. So that's the reason why they have to sustain. So farming become very sustainable, not a financial gain. And in terms of law, we have imposed colonial laws and, we subline the customary justice system. Right? Usually the discourse that they use is customary justice system is not a justice system. It's just a belief system. And belief is not important for them because belief cannot be measured. Right? So that's a problem. Next. All right, so decolonizing practices, especially in education, to achieve this, we need to revise our curriculum. Right? We need to include marginalized voices. So when you study, include indigenous people, right? Include orang asli as your respondents. Include local community as your respondents, right? And then you have to try to prioritize participatory community-based methods. Very anthropology in that sense. And in environmental humanities, we are now using what we call embodied methodologies. Embodied methodologies meaning that we use our own body to experience the environment, right? And then language, writing, publishing in local languages are also very important. In UKM, we encourage publication in Bahasa Melayu, and people can win award for publishing in Bahasa Melayu. All right, next. So there are some obstacles or challenges. For example, resistance from institutions benefiting from the status quo. We all have that problem. Any university has that. And lack of funding for alternative knowledge systems. But the ironic thing is, right? Listen, the ironic thing is, it's easier to get funding from overseas to fund research on alternative knowledge system than from our own country. Right? So actually it's easier to get funding, research funding from overseas than to local funding to study local knowledge. Because why? We buy into the so-called international language, right? Whereas they are more interested in our own nuances. Do you understand? We try to fit into what they call international standard, but they are more interested in our own story. So that's the irony of it, right? And then there are also what we call internalized colonialism. When you think that the West is better, then you are having that internalized Western colonialization, right? So basically, if you think that being blonde is more beautiful, if you think fairer skin is more beautiful, that is also what we call internalized colonialism. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, so don't think that just because somebody is fair skinned, you are dark skinned, you are not beautiful. Those who think that white, that's why whitening cream is so what do you call that? Sought after in this country. And in fact, when they study the sale of whitening cream in India, whitening cream in India is really, really like high in sale because they want to look white. But in India, they have a different context because blackness is also associated with caste system, right? The darker your skin, the lower your caste is. You know, the Hindustan stars that you watch, they come from different region or they are very fair skin. Fair skin closer to the Western skin. That's why you see Hollywood stars are very good looking, very fair skin, right? But if you go to India, most of them, like you watch Malaysian drama or Malaysian films, right? How many of you look like Daniel, was that Daniel or whatever? Right? How many of you look like that? How many of you look like who? Zul, right? Yeah, because when you walk on the street of, like not on the street of Malaysia, you walk on the aisle, you see nobody looks like any of those people, right? See, because those Pan-Asian look, right, because they are closer to the West, make money. But the reality is, how many of us actually look like them? But if an alien lands in Malaysia, watch Malaysian drama, the alien would think that, oh, Malaysians should look like that, right? But when the alien walks down the street, they only look at us and the alien would say, why are you so ugly? Right? Because you don't look like Zul Arifin. Do you understand what I mean? Because media doesn't give us the right portrayal, right? Or the right look. Okay, next. Okay, so what I'm doing here is a call to action. Coming from critical paradigm, we don't stop at doing research. We call for action. So please, you need to amplify marginalized scholars. That means we have to start citing local authors. All right, for young scholars, professionals, or whatever medium scholars or advanced scholars, please try to cite local scholars. But when I'm saying citing, cite the idea, not just the sentence. We have problems with people citing a sentence, but there's no idea in the sentence, right? And you need to question universal truths and bring back our reality and support indigenous knowledge preservation. All right, next. Okay, so I'm giving you 3 affidavits today. One is about challenging global gender narrative, right? So let me tell you a story when I first came back from studying abroad, because part of my research was on gender, and I studied all forms of feminist movements, from the first radical feminist movement to post-feminist movement, and the idea that, you know, the common thread is that the world is very patriarchy, meaning that the world is controlled by men, right? Patriarchy is a Christian, right? It comes from the Christian church, patriarch, right? So I came back studying feminist theories from feminists themselves, Western feminists. Even though I'm a man, everything I see about Malaysian men was wrong. Do you understand? Then was past tense, all right? Right? Everything like males are basically pricks, sorry, a bad word, and chauvinistic, right? And then I work with women NGOs, and because when I was the gender expert at Ministry of Women, and I realized there are hidden ideologies going on with some NGOs. Maybe that ideology is different from my awareness of myself as a Muslim man. And the fact that I'm very aware about women's rights, because the fortunate thing is because I'm married to an ustazah. So she tells me a lot about Islamic, laws and women's rights in Islam and stuff like that. So I realized feminism, some aspects of Western feminisms are okay and relevant, but some of them are very ominous. And these are the problems that we face because we try to cater to the international agreement that we have about women's rights, for example, CEDAW violence against women, you know. And for example, the law about rape in Malaysia is also for me double standard. Do you know why I say the law about rape has double standard in Malaysia? Because why? Because in Malaysian law, only women can be raped. But men also experience rape. Right? I mean, don't be embarrassed about it. Right? It happens. But because we are not allowed to call men victims as being raped. So if you look at police data, you will have, like say, under category of rape, you only have data of women being raped, but no men being raped. Because men, based on our law, can never be raped. Right? Do you know that? So men, if you experience something that you call rape, don't go screaming at the police saying, I've been raped, because there's no such thing as men being raped. So that is the kind of language that we need to challenge. Do you understand? Yeah. Because now, especially now, men can also be victims of rapes. Men can also be victims of domestic violence. Right? But the language of empowerment in itself can be problematic if you don't challenge it, right? And the claims of universal values, universal standard, but I'm not saying it in the sense that I'm belittling the problem that women face. Women do face discrimination and continue to face discrimination in Malaysia. But we need to look back at these terms critically and ask, why is it not reflecting the reality of our culture, the way we value our women, the way we value our men, right? Why do we use the measurement provided by the West or United Nations, right? So you need to do that. Don't be embarrassed because we need to talk about it. Do you understand? I remember when my house was broken into, I went back for Raya with a friend and I came back and my house was broken into. And I said to the police and he was shocked when I said, let me translate it into English. I said, sorry, I feel like, I feel like I'm being raped. I use that word, I'm being raped. Because somebody has gone into my private space, because my bedroom is my private space, my house is my private space. And how do feminists describe women's body? Private space, right? Feminists define women's body as women's private space. So my house, I define it as my private space. That's the reason why my wife bans me from taking a photo or sharing it on TikTok, the bedroom. Never show our bedroom to anybody because it's a private space. And when somebody get into your house, throw things in your private space, is it not rape? Right? See, but people don't understand what I'm talking about because I think differently. But what I'm saying is we need to redefine so many aspects of our reality so that we can talk about it in a way that people can understand. All right? Okay, next. All right, affidavit B. Okay, this is quite tricky. University ranking. All of you know about university ranking, right? Right? Especially students, you know. And for me, university ranking, for me, not for UKM, is a very dangerous and costly game. And reputation isn't cheap. Our government has spent millions of Malaysian ringgit for this particular game. For me, it becomes a type of fetishism, that we have to actually do this, right? UITM is also in the ranking game, right? Yeah, but UKM is also in the ranking game, but because we are a research university, so it's a different game altogether, right? So the question is, who are we trying to appeal or pander to? right? And does it really work at the level of the working class, like people who work at the university? Do you actually benefit from it, right? And why are we buying into this business? Like for example, in publication we have Clarivet, we have Scopus. Some Scopus journals charge you up to 4,000 US dollars to publish, right? But why are we using those money to buy into that business? To publish a paper that nobody reads, including our co-authors. Do you understand? Right? So who benefited at the end of the day? Those who claim that this is the universal standard. All right? Okay, next. Affidavit C. All right? Okay. This is relevant to the young ones. Malaysia now is heading, the old one like us as well, Prof. Right? Malaysia is heading towards an aging society by 2030, which is how many years from now? We will be an aged nation. I'm very worried because I'll be retiring at that time. I'll be a senior citizen at that time. All right? In Korea, until recently, the birth rate is considered not replaceable. Do you know what it means? That means the birth rate is so low that if every woman in Korea, if I'm not mistaken, give birth to 3 children, they still cannot recover. Do you understand? We are still like 1 point something. That means if one person doesn't give birth, another person 3, we're still okay. But we are moving towards that, which means over 15% of the population will be elderly people. And elderly people are very expensive to keep. I'm sorry, I'm going to be very expensive to keep as well. So pension is very important. Saving is very important. So now, no young people to take care of the elderly and the nation. That's what happened when we become elderly. And a lot of young people are moving abroad or moving away from the family. So the elderly people will be taken care by the institutions, right? So it will be a burden to the country. Okay, next, I want to show this slide because so I was thinking about it because I attended a workshop organized by University Putra Malaysia. I lived during the Pertanian time. University Putra Malaysia. They have their Center for Elderly Research, whatever, and they brought in researchers from Korea. And then throughout the discussion, I realized that one of the things that actually struck true to me is the notion of women empowerment, because I work towards women empowerment and becomes 5 more minutes. Okay, all right. The idea is because of the fact that we are always talking about women empowerment, but we don't talk about empowering the men. Right? It's always about empowering the women. A lot of women, financial allocation is given to women empowerment, but not to empower men. Right? Because of that. And now, because of social media, whatever, you see that the meaning of romantic love, the love between men and women, marriage and family has also changed. Right? Based on the report that we received, more and more young people are not interested in getting married. Right? Or if they are getting married, they are not interested in having babies. Right? So you see where the problem is? Right? So we have more and more young people who are not interested in getting married. If they do get married, they are not interested in having children. By choice. So we know that we go into, I'm not saying that it's their responsibility, but then eventually we all will be wiped out of this country if nobody wants to give birth, right? But this also stems from the idea that we don't address the fact that both men and women should be empowered. At least men should be educated to align their masculinity or realign their masculinity with the changing time, right? So where do young people like you learn about this? The common sense about not getting married is okay because you can have sex anytime now because all these dating websites, and what happened to marriage institution? Because you get this idea, this common sense from watching films, drama. If you look at Malay dramas, I don't really watch Malay dramas, but the one that I watch are so bad. Because every time a husband and a wife talk, right, they always scream at each other. You know, as if that's the only way to communicate, or as if that's the only way to communicate anger, right? All right, so gender roles are seen as rights and privilege and not responsibilities. We as Muslims, we should see roles as a father, as a son, as responsibilities, not as a privilege. Women also should see the role of a wife as a responsibility, not as a privilege, not as a right only. And then you will see in TikTok, women are complaining, oh, my husband is not cooking, my husband is not doing, you know, because we are not talking about it as our responsibilities together. We are talking about, oh, my privilege as a husband, my privilege as a wife. I think that's also something that we need to localize, decolonize the idea that we get from the social media. All right, next, I have to speed up. All right, so for inclusive education, for sustainable future, we need to decolonize knowledge, because at the end of the day, it will bring more justice, diversity, and relevance in a more ironic way, perhaps. Okay, next. But there are hypocrisies. That's why I warn you about universal truth, about universal standard, because there are hypocrisies. Next. Think inclusivity. Is this the inclusive world that people are talking about? If you think of Palestine, is this inclusivity that United Nations has been forced into our throat? No. And they keep saying, oh, Malaysians are not inclusive, you should be inclusive. But what is the international community, whoever they are, is doing? This is not inclusivity, this is exclusivity. Right? Next. We think about sustainable future. The world is saying we need to think about sustainable future, while simultaneously, this is what's happening in Palestine. They have no future and no way of sustaining it. These are the hypocrisies that when we can understand if we go back to our knowledge and question the universal values that's being propagated through the media especially. Next. All right. So we have to call for action and advocacy. I think it's very sad. This is my personal opinion, but I would like to share it. It is very sad when in Palestine now people are dying and we have all these silly dances in YouTube for Raya. And we call ourselves Muslim-dominated countries. So I would call for action and advocacy. That's part of me as being a critical scholar. All right, next. All right. So why context matters? Conclusion will be because our story matters and how we tell our story matters. And because our context provides nuances that are crucial in shaping our identity. Because what we tell others is as important as what we tell ourselves. All right? And because, importantly, we need to make sense of our own lives, our own reality, and we need to understand our own purposes. And research, essentially, is about us making sense of why we are here in the first place. Right, next. Okay. Ultimately, for me, it might be a dream, but I would say that we need local knowledge because we need our own metaphor to live by. Don't live by somebody else's metaphor. We need our own national consciousness, national metaphor in which we can live by. All right, next. All right, so I would just summarize because I don't have the time. I would say that academia also works within the context. And I would welcome articles that foreground local knowledge, context, but also have global resonance, because we don't want it to be too specific, because at the end of the day, the world says that the article must have the global relevance because you want other people to read about our story, right? So you need to do something that has global resonance. The articles that we have been receiving are quite specific, that it's very difficult for other people, even in other Southeast Asian countries, to relate to what we do. So what I meant by global resonance is, one, you have, despite the fact that your research can be interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, must be rooted in a very clear ontology, right? Very clear ontology. What field are you talking about? Because people in the field will want to go and read about it, right? So it has to be ontologically clear. But for me, when I took over Academica, I tried to play down on the methodology, because I think now the trend is, even for PhD, yeah, the emphasis is more on the methodology and less on the philosophy itself, whereas it's called Doctor of Philosophy, right? So I have already informed my editors, please, only the reviewers, we have to look at, it's my job as the editor to always look at the article again, even after the reviewing process, because sometimes we don't get a high standard review. But for me, I would not penalize an article if the epistemology is not that, or is quite strange because they apply something that we are not very familiar with. Because for me, it's the idea that's been debated, that's being discussed is more important, especially in humanities. Huh? So basically, we seek articles that tell local nuances, but with global resonances, right? Okay, next, a quick one. Okay, next. Okay, next. Okay, next. Okay, next. Sorry. Okay, now I would like to tell you that we are undergoing Scopus review. Actually, the editor, two editors before me, they applied, they couldn't get the Scopus. The main comment was because we don't have focus. So because of that, Academica only publishes article about Southeast Asia. So let's say you have a Chinese student or Chinese partner, they write about China. Maybe you can include like the implication of that study to Southeast Asia or to Malaysia. So we can still consider that, right? And I'm also looking for creative initiatives. And I also create initiatives for my editors and reviewers. And I would encourage knowledge sharing and dialogue like this. And I would organize small and intimate seminar, and I would welcome invitation to conduct writing workshop. Okay, I think I better open to question and answer rather than continue with the slide. Okay, can we just go through the slide? All right, these are the tips that maybe I can share with the organizer. Next. All right, to sustain the future, Academica must be as inclusive as possible. And last, the end. Okay, so thank you very much. Next. Okay. Sorry, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think you are happy that I finished eventually. And yeah, just kidding. I hope at least you understand a few things, but we are open for question, right? All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Jem. All right. So we will now open the floor for a short Q&A session. Maybe can we have like 2 questions? Okay. Okay. So we have one here. All right. I will pass the mic.
Okay, clear, clear.
Yeah.
So as I understand about the decolonizing knowledge too, I would like to ask, as a student, how can we contribute to change the past that has been colonized?
Sorry, what? Sorry. You as a student.
Okay, as you mentioned earlier about the colonizing knowledge, it's talk about how we looking forward to history and how the past is colonized. So as a student, how can we contribute to change the past that has been decolonized?
Okay, actually, colonization is still happening. It's not in the past. Even in our historical present, we are still being colonized. That's what I'm saying. It's okay, huh? It's okay. Thank you very much for the question. What I'm saying is we are still being colonized in different ways through education, right? Through education, through media especially, right? So you as a student, the least that you can do is to start questioning the common sense. Right? Start questioning the common sense. Meaning that if somebody say, because everybody is doing it, or somebody, this is, you have to start questioning. As young students, you have to seek knowledge and start questioning, because you have to question with knowledge. And believe me, we have an argument, they have 20 arguments back at us. That's why we need knowledge. But start with questioning the common sense. But not all common senses are bad common sense. All right? Okay.
Thank you. Can we have like one last question to Dr. Jem? Anybody?
It's okay. 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter. Don't be scared. How do you empower if you are scared? Or you can comment. If you don't have a question, you can comment. Or you disagree with anything, you can disagree. But I would like to remind you, colonization is still happening. It's not history. All right.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
You said earlier, instead of we should accept everything, we should questions again, right?
Yeah.
So what if we don't have any capacity to ask, to questions that?
All right, that's a very good question, because Islam as an epistemology provides us with the answer, right? What do we do in Islam? Right? That's what I mean, going back to our own local knowledge, right? But even though in Islam we just disagree in our mind, we can still change. We change with ourselves first. And then the people that we educate, the people that we encounter every day. Do you understand what I mean? Because your belief is empowerment is about like what superhero is saying. You have to be able to walk and shout at people. That's why you look at Malay drama now. Women are considered strong when they can shout at their husbands, right? Right? Because whose template, whose knowledge are we using? Yeah. Do you understand? See, even go back to our knowledge in Islam, it already gives us the solution. If you feel that you don't have the power to say something, you can say it in your heart that you are not allowing this to happen. And then action. You don't teach your children to do that. Do you understand? See, it's not that difficult. We just go back to our own local knowledge. All right? Next. I think somebody raised hand. Oh, you just want to go to the toilet just now. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jamaluddin. Dr. Jamaluddin, can you remain on the stage for
Yes, I
token
can.
of appreciation? Now, I would like to invite Yang Berusaha Professor Dr. Azman, Chairman of the Meet 2025, accompanied by Yang Berusaha Dr. Nur Aziza Binti Abdul Rahman, Vice Chancellor of IAC, to present the token of appreciation to Dr. Jamaluddin.
Pandang pertama dia menasumsikan Karena something that you habis buat Sama buku sini tiap hari sampai pada penuh Hingga nona manis lagi Enggak tesis dalam curi ada mai Aku apa bukan istriku begitu Masalah itu bukan batin amamu Tuhan dikit yang bisa Coba kasih effortnya saja Kalau memang cocok bisa datang ke rumah Tetus jalan turun lagu malu Aduh hari ini mau juga abang yang laju Tetus jalan turun lagu
So that concludes our keynote session for today. We hope that today's session has inspired inspired new conversations, encouraged critical thinking, and reminded us the importance of anchoring our knowledge in our own cultural and social realities. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the conference. Assalamualaikum.
Nona aku goyang pijak-pijak, nona aku goyang lincah-lincah, goyang ke pinggang patah-patah, putar ke kiri dan ke kanan. Nona aku goyang pijak-pijak, nona aku goyang lincah-lincah, goyang ke pinggang patah-patah, ikuti jalan ini. Yeah. Kalau soal bahasa, nona manis ini paling asik ya. Apalagi dorong tempat tinggal mama ya, cantik pendek sampai pagi.